For years, people would say that Davos was just a massive waste of time and money, just fat cat businessmen meeting up to have extremely expensive pints of beer charged to government and NGO balance sheets or business expense accounts. And it was just a big old, I don't know, party for the boys, like spring, that thing that you do in America where you all go, yo, spring break, except the sort of the corporate version. But really boring, apparently. And as well, during that time, you'd have really erudite people making extremely eloquent speeches, basically into a vacuum where people didn't really care. And you'd be thinking, hey, what's the point in all these wonderful orators that we have in the country, you know, speaking into nothing about nothing. And then suddenly the world resolves, and you see that all of that wasted money and time in Davos over the last couple of decades actually serves a purpose, because all of a sudden you have a president in America who essentially is a businessman. So what's like the UN mean to Donald Trump or NATO? These things, they're things of politicians. Whereas a big business soiree to talk about the economic future, well, how much do the drinks cost? And if the price per pint is somewhere up there above, 30 quid per pint, then Donald Trump's probably going to really enjoy himself and have progress made. And you think, well, actually, Davos maybe does serve a purpose after all. Especially when going into Davos, there was this major problem. It's hard to know exactly whether or not this is a storm in a teacup or the end of the world, as America wants to take over Iceland or Greenland, not really sure which. And this is what could be considered to be a worthless piece of land, which really isn't worth having anybody fight over. So over the last few days, we've been wondering, oh my goodness, is there going to be a fight over this? And looking at the markets being closed on Monday, you think, oh my goodness, this is a long weekend, the news cycle extends out. This is going to take a while to resolve. Traditional markets closed, but what was open? Futures. And what could you see on the futures chart? Bring up the futures chart here beside me. S&P futures, for example. What you could see was, as this news was coming out, the markets were reacting extremely badly. Dump. And in fact, they were going to continue to dump. It wasn't a case of like waiting to see how markets react when they open up again on Tuesday. There was going to be a case of waiting until Davos on Wednesday to see what Donald Trump was going to say, because while the world could look at the speeches coming out of Davos on Monday for some sign of certainty, Besant, who spoke, big one of the big cheeses in America, he spoke on Tuesday at Davos and mentioned multiple times the word certainty. And you think to yourself, hey, this is going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine, because you have one of the leaders of the world having to explain to us that everything is going to be fine. And you know what? As human beings, we typically actually start to panic more whenever we hear somebody out there saying, oh, don't worry, because you think, wait a minute, actually, he's telling us there's certainty, but I'm pretty certain there is none. And the markets continue to dump right into Tuesday. Of course they did, into Wednesday, right until Sir Donald actually got up and started speaking. And then things have been going really well since. So we were kind of waiting for Wednesday. Is it actually a fix? Not really. Let's just jump over the SPX charts where it's easier to see this a bit more clearly. And there's an interesting dynamic I want to show here to just kind of follow on from last week's show as well as it happens. That's that huge gap that was the result of the kind of going to war with Europe, America saying, do you know what? we're what you hear is, we did everything in World War II. You know, we won World War II. We had to do all of that. We've done everything since. You know what? We're so fed up with it. We're just going to go and join them. We're going to join them now. So we are the Russians and we are the Nazis. That's what it's like. It's like, wait a minute, because you know we live in a binary world. This is the Western world. You're either the good guys or the bad guys, and we're like sitting there saying, well, we're the good guys. If you're going to be Russian, then that makes you the bad guys. That's basically the Nazis. So that was, and this is the Americans themselves who were the ones who liked that message the worst of all, were of course dumping the market. That's then was recovered somewhat with a spike up today, back up towards $6,900 for SPX, but actually then it did give that back up again. That's okay overall, because it's moved back into this gap and it's showing that the world isn't ending right now, which is what you wanted to see from Wednesday from Trump. So that was what we were anticipating. But is it enough to be positive about yet? And what's really kind of, if we've moved back to a sense of equilibrium, then maybe we're looking to the next thing. What is the next thing? And this is why it's like a storm in a teacup or the end of the world. The truth is, right, you strip away all of the hyperbolics, right, that are getting flown around out there, and you look at what's actually happening in the world right now, and it's kind of like you're inclined to think, what's this distracting us from? Because the Greenland thing and everything else, it's either it's the end of the world, right, and I'm okay, I can get on board with that, or it's not, and it's like somebody else's circus, right? And that's why today's episode is called "Not My Circus, Not My Monkey," because I think that's the clearest phrase to explain how I think most people actually in the world are feeling about what's going on right now. Strip away all the strong language and the funny sentences and the sort of kind of threats of war and so on, and what you're left with is nothing at all. In fact, we're in that period right now where there's the moratorium on the Fed having speeches or talking about anything. It's one of those times, because just before you go into a Fed meeting where they decide the interest rate and all that, they're able to give speeches up to a certain point, but then if you start speaking about it, you know, and then you say, oh, hold on 5 minutes, guy, you walk inside, you make the decision, you come back out and you continue your interview, that's not allowed. And so it's not just 5 minutes, it's a period of days before the meeting that you're not allowed to speak. So we're in that period now when all this is happening, and a big chunk of like Trump chatting at Davos, of course, was about Too Late Powell. Funny that his nickname is Too Late for having essentially, actually, because he didn't raise interest rates fast enough the first time around back under Biden and made a massive mistake. Actually, it's a mistake he's owned up to. It's a big mistake that he made. Getting compliments, hey-ho, what's that, off of Donald Trump today at Davos for having done it that way, saying he did it fine the first time around because he was slow to upload to bring them up, but he's being slow to bring them down this time, and that's what it's causing the issue. So there's this confusing stuff happening in the world, and either it's like distracting us away from something else, but then you look to see what it is, and it's I didn't see it. I don't see what the thing is I'm being distracted away from right now. Nothing new, unless it's just distracting us away from Venezuela and Epstein files and whatever else, you know, you want to go on and say, oh, this is distraction from, but like those are things we're knowing about. Like what's developing right now that this is distracting us from? I'm not too sure. I've not seen it. Nobody's found it out yet. So then it's kind of like this nothing burger. There's just really just the Fed meeting is coming up this week. We've returned to a sense of normalcy, I suppose, and the Fed meeting is coming up this week, and that's the next big thing. The Fed themselves can't comment on what's being said or done. It's like you've got Bessent out there saying there's lots of certainty, but what we're almost certainly going to hear from the Fed is that in a world where you have the president of the free world threatening the world part of that phrase, free world, right, is everybody else. So when you got the president of the free world threatening the world part of the free world thing, kind of undermines the free part. It's funny, and when you looked at Carney's speech today, this is what I was meaning before as well, and I said that we've had decades of people making speeches into the vacuum, which are very eloquent and they're very smart, but it kind of added up to nothing. But now you've got this forum, and the context outside of it makes Carney's speech apparently the best speech of his life. And to be quite honest with you, I've seen that guy do a lot of speeches over the years, and it isn't really any better than any of the speeches he ever gave as the governor of the Bank of England, for example. But here we are in a situation where context is putting so much pressure on the situation. And then you strip it away, and just like it as it is, like as an adult who looks at like the children arguing in the playground, when you take away like the he said, she said of it all, and you look at the actual situation, you find out that really there is nothing there. Nothing to fight about, nothing actually happening. There's a Fed meeting coming up, but they're not even allowed to talk about it. And in the meantime, you've got a confused message coming out from about the Fed interest rates and what to be expected. Now, if they were to speak, they would say that the war chat creates uncertainty. That's the only certainty that we can really have, despite what Besant said about certainty. And that's the mood going into the meeting. So while Davos was going to give us a degree of certainty, what certainty we got from Davos was the big question, the original kind of headline question, like, is this the end of the world? And he gets up on stage and he says, I'm not going to go in there and invade Greenland with actual armies and whatnot. And the whole world went, and even he made a joke about it at the time. He's like, I could tell there's some sighs of relief out there. It's quite funny, actually. But such a serious topic that when you realize that there's this funny moment happening, it takes away from the, okay, cool, the pressure's off. And that was a big deal, but it doesn't take us to like new territory, right? That's just returning back to normal. And that's why I'm saying that you can see this in charts. Okay, so we have created this gap, pushed up into it, made it like, solid halfway in and came back down. We've returned to a sense of the world isn't ending right here, right now, but we've certainly not got into the sort of, we're still pretty sure the sun's going to rise tomorrow, but it's not actually begun rising yet. We're still in the dark part of the night. So that's where we are right now. But the interesting kind of part about this, I'll just bring up some NASDAQ stuff so you can see that, of course, it was similar too. It actually pushed up to try and close the gap, came back down and is sitting at where halfway through would be. That's the triple Qs. You want to see how it looked on futures, for example. There's maybe that if you find that to be a cleaner picture. Let's take a look though at the US Small Cap 2000 Index, the Russell, and we can see this story on the Russell chart. That's actually a little bit different. Now this is the gap here, right? This area just here is where that gap was, and then you can see that this, right, it's not the same chart as the other two. Why is that? And that takes us back to what we were talking about last week, and takes us back to the context of everything on this show. We're so far ahead of the market, right? So far ahead even of the news cycle that we were able to predict, as we spoke about last week on the show as well, that there were this bear trap set up, or bull trap set up, for potential fall through on the bearish side on crypto, and explained why and how and everything to understand that, and then waited to see it pan out. But now for a bull trap to happen like that, you need to have the positive rise into it, then the sudden shock drop down. And often those shock drops are associated with some real world context that was unpredictable in advance. If it was predictable, it wouldn't be a bull trap, it would just be normal, right? But the trap part means it's definitely unpredictable. So what was so unpredictable about it that we were able to predict it? Now, we didn't know what was going to happen, which was the Greenland chat, but we did know something was in the works there to create this into a bull trap situation, which otherwise would have been a recovery in the market, right? And that was the whole chat. And we also spoke about amazing dynamics that are happening in the market right now with regards to breadth and where the strength in the economy truly is. When the big part of that story, of course, was like the Russell 2000. It's an index. If you're new here, hi, welcome to the show. My name's Rocky. I'm a professional at all of this, not financial advice. The like button is appreciated, and there's your kind of housekeeping. Thanks for joining us. What we've been talking about here has been that there's this Russell index, which is a kind of a single price to represent 2,000 companies in the US, which aren't those top 500 best performing companies. It's not Apple, it's not Microsoft, but it's really the kind of companies that you interact with and that probably pay your mortgage and pay your wages. It's like that, your day-to-day life companies, all of the thousands that you use. And it's a better read on kind of the economy that you live with, like the cost of living crisis. So for instance, today Trump was talking in his Davos speech about how hundreds of millions or billions of dollars being added to pension funds, making the seniors wealthier because the stock market has had 52 all-time highs this year, or in the last year since he was inaugurated. Is that the word you use when it's the second time to get around? The re-inaugurated? Inaugurated for the second time. So augurated. Okay, cool. It's about 52 new all-time highs, and that's a major point that adds millions and billions of dollars to pension funds. But then we, the people, we asked the question about the cost of living crisis and how we don't see this wealth represented in the, our wage packets, or the ability to send your kids on that skiing holiday or whatever it is that's really hitting in your life, be it a big thing or a small thing. Because for a lot of people, they have to choose between eating or heating at the minute. So how do you reconcile that with this amazing all-time high succession? It's like, well, because there was a bit of pain in the middle belly of the economy, the real part that you look at, and that's why we were looking at this thing. And we predicted that there'd actually be a rise up that outruns actually outperforms the main indexes of NASDAQ, SPX, the ones that your CNNs and the fake newses, or indeed the real so-called real news, whatever way you want to look at it, just any news that you're getting, those ones, they'll look at them instead. And we said, what's it actually going to outperform that over the next few weeks? Amazingly, it did, and it beat a record last week. It beat the record that it had for 35 years. I don't know what the record is now, right? But it was beating it again. I mean, it's beating it. So, and I mean, it's not worth my time looking up records which are like that's broken, that's from way before I was even born. I mean, what's the point? So, it's a lifetime, and that's good enough for me. Amazing stuff that's happened here, and that's the story with the economy right now. And it brings us back to a question about, well, if it's a nothing burger, what are we feeling and what are we talking about here? And actually, I mean, what's the point of me saying it here after the fact? How about I go back in time a little bit before and talk about me saying it before the fact? And if you're a member of my Discord, go patreon.com/RockyOutcrop and join up and all that crack. Then you could be part of this conversation here, which not a lot of people were. I was talking about it yesterday and explaining all the ongoing stuff. Actually, I was talking about it over the last few days. And the story going into this week was we had to roll over Besant, look to Wednesday for some sense of resolution as to, is this panic going to end? And then through into next week, and this is what I'm telling you here on the show. So I'll continue that conversation in the Discord, of course, but we're now looking towards the Fed. There's a feeling, which is going to catch up with everybody else, that they're not really aware of the major question that they're asking. The panic, which creates a sort of cognitive dissonance and information gap problem. It's difficult to define at the time, but you know that you're panicking because something big is happening. That panic that's happened recently is to do with like so many kind of confused, funny little statements. What even is sovereignty of a country? What even is it? What is it to be a country? Can you tell me what it is to be a country? I can tell you two things. Like, one is that Scotland is one of the oldest countries in the world, and it's definitely a country. We got this amazing Declaration of Arbroath, which 100% inspired the US Declaration of Independence, and it's fantastic. You can Google up and read it. I would read it now, but I'd just be overwhelmed with the emotion and passion of the thing. I just better not touch that. It's just so good. It's honestly, check it out if you're American, you love your Constitution, you love your Declaration of Independence, then you want to see some real romantic and amazing stuff, check out the original one, our one. So we've existed for a long time, and we've had wars. I mean, just up the road from where I am, there's a castle which has been invaded like over 1,000 times by like the English and stuff like that. We had to fight with them. That movie Braveheart, a lot of that stuff really did happen. And it's not just that. I mean, it's gone on for a long time. We're definitely a country. I can tell you, we exist. We're a country, right? We have got a lot of sovereignty. You know we're a country. But to tell you what, California has got more sovereignty as California than Scotland has. And we actually are a country, whereas California isn't a country. Weird, isn't it? The United States of America is this kind of collection of countries that spans such a wide period of time that you have to have your stock market open up later than anybody else is in the world, right? Because we all get up in the mornings, but America doesn't even start work until 9:30, and then close like earlier, but have the longest periods of post-market and pre-market in the world, like all just to cope with the fact that people from San Francisco don't even get out of bed until it's 2 p.m. where you are. So that's America is like Star Trek, right? It's the future, sure, but it's a collection of these things which are basically countries, and you fight about it. The whole thing in other countries is that we've got like right wing, left wing, conservative, liberal, all that, nationalist stuff, whatever. We've got all sorts of things. In America, you've got Republicans and Democrats, right? And your biggest argument that you've had since day one is whether or not the individual states, which have more power independently than we do in Scotland, and we actually are a country, for a reminder, anyone who's just joining us, you've got more power over there individually, is the fight as to whether or not they should have more power versus the Democrats who are like, no, we need to have it so that there's some more homogenous stuff going on in our so-called country, because the country is United States, but the United States is a united set of, and this is the conflict that exists. I mean, most people around the world don't even understand that US politics has got a conflict where individual people inside their kind of basically a country are trying to assert their right to have their democratic principles adhered to. So a lot of Republicans in the audience right now are listening to me going, this guy gets the fact that he gets it. And then but then a lot of people in the world don't understand that, of course, the United States is the country. So the Democrats listening are like, yeah, he gets it. And it's like, but people on the outside don't even know that debate happens at all. And you guys don't know what politics is like in the rest of the world. Like I mean, for the most part, in the same way that we don't know what it's like over there, just making great generalizations here. So this is a complex situation, and going around saying that America could just buy it, like the way that it bought Missouri off of the French for some nutmeg, is kind of hilarious, because the guys that just arrived on a boat to Greenland that gave them property over it are kind of a lot like the guys that were the white guys that arrived in America that decided that they owned it and took off the Native Americans and then so much so that they were able to swap it for some freaking nutmeg. And these are people who've had to fight for hundreds of years just to get identified, their rights within America. So the world's complex, and understanding that sovereignty is complex, but also understanding that you just can't go swapping it around so willy-nilly. And what makes a country is something like what we did back hundreds of years ago when we made the Declaration of Arbroath. And there's an idea about sovereignty and citizens of a country and what it is to have a nationhood, which has existed in an ethereal space outside of any individual human's consciousness for the longest time. So that even when you've seen major revolutions happen in the world, such as the Bolshevik revolution in the early 20th century in Russia, when they became commies and they got rid of the Tsar, they had to still go through the process of actually international law in this vague way we all understand it. If you go through an airport exiting somewhere like, say, Cuba, and you go to Havana, which I appreciate most of the American audience watching won't have ever had the opportunity even to do, you'll notice hundreds of flags hanging from the ceiling of nations which America refuses to acknowledge. So much so that these flags, looking at them, would be like one of those pinko commies back in 1930 reading some Western poetry or something like that in the world where they'd banned all of that. It's like you see a flag and you recognize what it is for what it is. It has all this meaning behind it, but it's a flag you've never seen before, and and people around you recognize that flag exists, but you've never seen it, and suddenly you feel like you're on the outside and you don't control the narrative of what is and isn't. And that exists outside any of our heads of space. Scotland, that wants independence, has to ask England if it's able to have independence, and if it doesn't get it, then it can't ratify it, and the rest of the world wouldn't acknowledge that it was the case. Scotland wanted to stay in the EU. It is a country. England wanted to leave the EU. We voted, and there was a vote that showed we wanted to stay in. Northern Ireland kind of got to stay in because it's attached to Southern Ireland physically, and between the Irish and the British, there was an agreement to end the war that was happening there, that said that every person in the north of Ireland and the south of Ireland would have equal rights. I mean, equal rights is the sort of thing that Americans can understand. You get that. And it's a country, and they should have equal opportunity and rights, ability to express themselves. Well, the thing about that is that meant that Northern Ireland has basically stayed in the EU and Scotland's left. But even though Scotland is a country and the UK was leaving, and the UK couldn't just give Scotland its membership to the EU because you know what? There actually is a way the world works. And it goes back so far in time that even the Declaration of Arbroath complies to a standard that exists outside of human beings. It's this thing that's kind of like, are countries themselves even emergent from the people of the country? I mean, do you need to have things like an army and so on to be a country? Trump today got up and described Somalia as not even being a country. Some people are saying what he said was racist. Or was it just an accurate description of what it is to have nationhood? The debate about it is something that human beings themselves can individually have, but actually, is it even emergent from some idea outside of humanity, or is it something that we actually apply to something and create ourselves? Do we materialize it? I'm almost inclined to say is the opposite, in the same way that Americans call people from Iran Persians, even though that's almost, I don't know, it's almost racist. It's wrong. I mean, but it's right, but it's wrong. I mean, so like, Persia doesn't exist, by the way. It hasn't for, well, ever since the CIA destroyed it. So what even is sovereignty? And this is a question. This is a question that's it's about your cheese. Well, this is a question that people are struggling to answer right now, and realizing that this discussion is a discussion that people are going to be having over the next couple of weeks is knowing in advance the way that the cognitive dissonance has to kind of resolve inside the heads of the average investor, reporter, and so on, who's realizing that America isn't going to invade and destroy its alliances with Europe, but is in a world where it's creating a perspective, and when you can, and you have to go along with it, or you have to come up with your own perspective and express your own one coherently enough to be the challenge. What we see is people saying that Carney's speech, who's the leader of Canada, by the way, who spoke the day before Trump did, was directing a lot of talk at Trump in his speech. And they say it was brilliant, but it wasn't. It was actually, to me, rather uninspiring. All of this stuff where you can go around and you can say to somebody, oh, look at them, they're just brown-nosing Trump, they're just sycophants. It's just like, shut up, what? They've understood that there's a perspective, and either you go along with it or you come up with your own perspective. But if you're going to just bitch and moan about things, then no one's going to listen to you. And all that Mark Carney did was just bitch and moan about stuff. It's like, come up with your own story. I want to hear your story. What's your perspective? And while I can say that I think that Trump's perspective is wrong, I can see he has one. And then I see somebody else come up and say what they think about Trump's perspective. And it's like, what? This is your opportunity as the leader of a nation. And it's like, well, you might need, in Trump's opinion, an army to exist as a nation, or whatever. I think Somalia and Ethiopia and all the rest of it actually do exist as nations. So I would disagree with Trump on that one. But I would say that the other ones are starting to look like that photograph in Back to the Future 2, which is fading out, when they have no perspective of their own. I mean, if you're going to be a nation, you're going to have at least an opinion and a view on what it is to be and to exist, and to be able to present that coherently, rather than just being a sounding board for some other country. Instead of being the United Kingdom or Canada, for instance, you just simply be the B-side on the record of the United States that everybody went into the shop to actually buy and nobody really cares about. And this is him talking about integration and talking about partnerships of equals. And I think, well, hey, if you want to get equal representation, you're going to have to start representing something. And it's not seeing that I'm only seeing the opposite opinion. And I think Trump's quite clear on the fact that he has a perspective and he's willing to negotiate and talk. And what everybody else is missing is the fact that they don't have one. Like it or lump it, he isn't out there to try and make friends or to just spitball and chat. And neither should anybody else be. And that's why, of course, there's a very lack of any traction in any dialogue that anybody has with him, because, well, obviously, in some senses, Trump cares more than almost anybody what the world thinks about him. Really, when it comes to the fact that there's this window of the presidency and trying to get stuff done, either he cares about what you think about him because you think nice stuff and you've got nothing to offer yourself. And if you're going to be a vacuous cloud of smoke, at least be one that smells nice. Fair enough, Trump, if he thinks like that. But if you're going to have your own perspective and have something to bring to the table, then he's willing enough for you to actually dislike him. And as you saw, that signals very clearly with the way that he interacts with Macron, Carney, and Starmer, the leaders of France, Canada, and the United Kingdom, whenever they're actually in the room with each other. And I think, well, hey, why is nobody picking up what's being put down? And that's why I say, it's not my circus, it's not my monkey. That's the explanation as to what's going on from last week, bearing fruit today, actually from the previous weeks in the past. As for the technical analysis that I really want to bring to the show today, it's going to have to be with regards to crypto, right? Crypto is the biggest handle we have right now on whether or not there's a risk on, risk off attitude in the world, liquidity, and so on. And the story of kind of Trump's speech today is writ large on the charts here as markets moved up at around about the time the speech was happening, and there was a mention towards the sort of genius bill or the Apple Genius Bar or whatever it is that Donald Trump is calling the crypto initiative. I'm not sure what it is, if there's a plan for crypto or if it's just simply him kind of talking about the name of the group chat that he has with his son. I'm not sure, but there's something happening and did get mentioned today. Then markets kind of tanked thereafter as the sort of following 20 to 30 minutes was reiterating once again that indeed there is going to be some Greenland issue which is going to keep going on, especially whenever Iceland started getting mentioned a lot and Greenland wasn't mentioned. For anybody who's not picking up on the joke, my brother and I were laughing about how you got the name wrong a lot. By the way, if you're wondering, yeah, exactly. Iceland has to do its due diligence. Yeah, Iceland has to do their due diligence. Say, look, you've mentioned us a lot of times here, and really challenge them on it, because you don't want to get a letter in the mail in 6 months and be told, look, Donald Trump did say your name 5 times there. He's taken you over and Greenland. That speech was about both of you. And you might be wondering why Greenland is called Greenland if it's one big block of ice and Iceland isn't. And a bit of history for you is that it started off in Denmark, which, by the way, I can tell you, as a Northern European myself, which has the straw that goes into the North Atlantic, hundreds of billions of dollars of lovely oil that Donald Trump is so right that we are absolutely keeping. We're keeping that. We've got it. We're hodling that oil. It's so funny because we've got diamond hands on that oil. It's still there. It's still good. It's not been drunk. Anyway, I live here in Scotland. It's cold enough, but Denmark, it's mighty cold. And they left from Denmark and they went to Iceland and they thought, "Whoa, it's cold here." And by the way, if you're the general geography on it, if you want to just imagine that you've got Europe on the right, you've got America on the left. At the top of Europe, there's Denmark, just somewhere at the top, right? In the middle of the water, there's this island, and it's high up, and it's called Iceland. And it's where the fabulous hotels are, and they have volcanoes and all this sort of stuff. And where they decided to default during the GFC, and it's amazingly worked out well for them. It's incredible history if you're interested in economics. And then if you go to the next thing over, you've got this massive ice sheet, and you wouldn't even know that it's an island. It's actually like this big India-shaped blob that's between this really small island and America, and that's Greenland, and it's all ice. So why is that happening? Well, they left Greenland, Denmark, which was cold, and they went to somewhere colder, and they were like, "Wow, this is really cold. This is Iceland." And obviously not many decided to go there, and then of that, not many, a few of them set out even further. And when they got there, they're like, "Holy crap, this is the coldest place I've ever been." But it's a country, yeah, let's make this work. how are we going to do it? We're going to have to get people to move here. So they went back to Iceland and Denmark, and they told them they'd found a new country. And I'm not making this up. This is the actual truth. And they said, what's it called? And they said Greenland, because they decided that people were not going to move there if they thought it was even worse than Iceland. So they deliberately called it Greenland. This is 1,000 years ago. And this is what I'm saying. This is 1,000 years ago. This is real history. Actual 1,000 years, not just, it wasn't like 150 and I'm exaggerating. It was 1,000 years ago. And they called it Greenland to as a marketing campaign to encourage Danes and Norwegians and whatever to move over to there. Now, did it work? No, it didn't. Mostly the people that live there are the equivalent of the North Americans, who you might remember existed in North America until the G word happened to them. But there still are some, and likewise, there's still some on Greenland. They didn't get the G word treatment though. Just there weren't ever very many, like Olaf and all the rest of it weren't able to convince very many people to go over to Greenland. But funnily enough, back then the weather was different, and you know how we've got all this stuff about the weather gets hot and cold, and so are we making it a greenhouse gas thing? But yeah, is penguin propaganda real? Right, so there's a debate happening. I mean, maybe we cause this or it happens anyway, and then there's a third part to this debate, which is we causing it and it happens anyway. But either way, in the past, Greenland actually was warmer than it is now. It's one of those ones. It's like they're like bring on climate change. You might think maybe, I don't know. Funny thing about climate change, of course, is that Iceland is actually warm because of the Gulf Stream. So Iceland is much greener than Greenland because of the Gulf Stream, which only exists because of the thing. And the worry about climate change is the Gulf Stream would end. Would that make Greenland better or worse? It would make it worse, probably. But that's it. So anyway, whenever they went over to populate it at first, there was longer summers, and more farmland, and it got worse afterwards. So then less people lived there. And then you think, well, what's the point in Greenland? And truly, honestly, what is the point in Greenland? Denmark have thought that themselves the whole time. The people who live on Iceland agreed, and then the people who lived on Greenland agreed knowingly, and therefore called it Greenland to try and convince other people to move there so they could try and get something going in the very first place. That's baked into Greenland's history. Are there maybe billions of dollars worth of minerals sitting below the surface? Like, possibly, but it'd be difficult to dig them out. Is the Golden Dome like, something Golden Dome? Like, okay, there's a sentence out there that's got the words Golden Dome in it, and yeah, that sounds good. I like the word golden, and domes are cool. Like, so if you could make a golden dome, it'd be like a massive Taj Mahal over the top of Greenland. I don't really know how it works, but sounds cool. And that's what's going to be discussed. So the future is going to be that discussion. Basically, we might be wondering, I suppose, in a sense, why I'm saying all this. And it's because that's the next week of realizations for the rest of the market. And that next week is the week into the Fed meeting. The Fed meeting is expected to be a hold. And that means that we'd be, we're left to our own devices again. This pickup in volatility is interesting. You'll note that there hasn't been an increase in volume during this period of time. It's a definite increase in volatility, and that speaks a lot to the atmosphere around at the minute, where people are willing to run, but as soon as they get to the exit on either side, they stop. If you've ever owned a nice big friendly dog, like a sheepdog, and a cat at the same time, you'll often see the dog running around trying to get the cat all the time, chasing after it like it wants to kill it. And then when it actually gets the cat, in a corner up next to it, and it looks at it and it has to decide, right, come on dog, you were chasing after it like you wanted to bite it. Are you going to bite it or not? The dog almost never can. Like, it never does. It's really hilarious watching dogs actually catch what they're chasing. They've only thought about the chasing part. They're like zombie movies, right? Everybody can imagine the start of a zombie movie. It's like, how are we going to end this? So it's like, I don't know. Nobody ever thinks of that. And Yeah, so it's the same thing happening in markets. That's why on the larger time frames on SPX and so on, they were caught in the middle. My sort of thrust on that is that yeah, there is a potential decision making time that's happening here on the on crypto as well. Crypto being important to people to watch because it is the handle that people have on whether or not the markets are risk on or risk off. So the we're looking at it here. Obviously, we trade crypto as well, and so far, got all the way down to market structure area where it could have made a decision, didn't make a decision, hasn't worked out for it in terms of actually get into the exit. Do you choose to leave? I don't know. It can run all through the corridors though, no problem, or it can chase that cat, no problem, but will it actually bite it? Who knows? And so it runs through it. It's done that. And if you look at the 4 hour time frame, this is some of the chat I was having inside the cryptocurrency chat room. Yes, we're back at that period now where we're just retesting where we were before we did the bear trap or the bull trap discussion, which was what all this subsequent up and down price action was in the intervening period of time. So we come back down here. The biggest question from that then, if you want to kind of resolve it into what the question is structurally, will anything change as a result of those happenings? And generally speaking, nothing has changed in this zone, right? Amazing. Okay, so there's a bit of clarity. It's coming from the charts, not coming from Mike Besant. That's definitely not where the source of clarity is coming from. But we can see that nothing has actually changed here. The volatility has driven us to the exit, ran through the corridors, but decided they didn't know what to do when it got to the revolving doors and span back around again. So the question will be then, of course, to what extent will we find ourselves running through the corridors again if we move up? Or can we actually, if we decide to go back to the exit again, make that leap of faith? Because the leap of faith on a bearish move, the leap could potentially be quite big. Could be, right? Could be a lot of things that you could look to here just as a kind of quick, it could be quite big thing, but it's easiest to look at in a big time frame. Look, if this overall trend were to end, it could go all the way down to like nothing. So that would be a big deal. But will it actually recover here? Now that's quite possible, and I want to take my cue from the kind of the more sensitive, because they're kind of sensitive equities, right? You have to be really supportive of equities. Like when an equity walks in the room, you have to be like, oh yo dude, you're an equity, tell me your name. Oh, amazing. Well, can I see, wow, what's your balance sheet look like? That's cool. Do you have the CEO, he's amazing. Oh wow, look at the product line. You're doing so well, equity. We love every aspect of it, whereas with cryptocurrency stuff, they've got no attachment issues. They just walk in the room and they're like, I was thinking for a second there, the rooms that they've been walking into recently though have to be fair been like food banks and homeless shelters and whatever, so they don't get asked many questions anyway in there. But yeah, look, this is not complex, right? It's not complex. Actually, it's much less complex than people want to make it. There's been a shock to the markets, to the world. That shock is going to resolve into more normal, rationalized sentences that actually make sense and can possibly exist. Things like Trump saying you don't get a piece of thing because a boat went to it, of course, is completely ridiculous, and it isn't related to anything, but it's a great story. So we need to kind of move on to chapter 2 and 3 of those kind of great stories to it's like, and then the guy said, but that didn't mean anything, the end. But we're on the first part where it's like, wow, there was a sentence and it tickles me, so let's listen. Anyway, we're not onto that part yet. That's why I've been explaining all this, and the story with crypto is, let's take a look towards equities as well to see how the sensitive little buggers get on, because they are really quite precious and they're quite sensitive. So if they do well, then great. It's going to be a really good signal for us. But Bitcoin is obviously the one that's quite volatile at the minute because it's the biggest handle on whether or not it's risk on, risk off. Trying to maintain 90 grand is really important. The drop down could take you to 70s and so on, something like that to be aware of. But this is the daily time frame. As you can see, prices drop down to challenge the 50 simple, and where they are right now at 90 grand is challenging that 50 simple again. If it can push above and establish itself, so in shorthand, if over the next week or two, you looked at crypto charts and saw, oh, Bitcoin is at 92,000, it's 91,000, you would know without having to check the charts that what the candles are being printed here are above the 50 simple, and they're going to start pushing up the way. And the longer it does that, then the closer it'll go towards 100 and start to make the chances of a golden cross happening. And that would be really good because it would signal to the markets that that is a risk appetite move as well as a crypto appetite move and so on. Right. That is important. Why? What's the context? Because the alternative, right? The alternative, if we look over to SPX here, you'll see a story with, come on, load in, if my moving averages load in here for me. Come on. They're not going to. Just go to the futures chart. Load up. There we go. You'll see a story which is the other way around, right? Recently, what's happened is the market's come back down to test the 50 simple period moving average. The recovery today has pushed them back up above it. If it fails to hold above it, like Bitcoin, if it fails to push above that line, if there's a pivot there, an inflection point, which is relevant across multiple assets, right? That's two so far. Then what you'd see is a move towards the 200 simple, which would be a big shock for US equities. They're quite sensitive. What would happen? Move back down to, like, say it went down to 6,200, it's still above where it was in March and April of this year. It's still above any price it was during Joe Biden's presidency. It's still very high market, but, you know, massively sensitive. That's what could happen. That could even lead to things like crosses, bearish crosses, the one that's called the death cross. So that's why you'd be looking towards those two major dynamics. And if I look over at some sort of third part of this multi-asset analysis here, if we conduct a sort of a full chain, then what we're looking to is silver potentially, because this is where the hype is right now. It's kind of like the hype coin in the crypto market of the day. This is like, I don't know, Floki. This was Floki in 2020, January 2025 or something like that. Wow, look at that meme coin go. That's why it's more relevant. Crash here obviously would be kind of a bigger deal. This is the gold chart, which is possibly where most people would be more inclined to look normally. It had highs up there towards, well, nearly at 5,000 today, but not quite, right? And the question is then, if it goes into 4,950, why not test up towards 5,000? Sure, but $5,000 gold is like what $100,000 Bitcoin was. It's such a big psychological thing. $5,000 gold is what it's like looking towards. Meanwhile, silver is right next to $100 silver. It's like such easy numbers, isn't it? And when you see such easy numbers, then you realize that the stupid people are in control. And when the stupid people are in control, then you realize that the argument that you're having, the big complex argument about like sovereignty, nationalists, like whether or not a boat went to and all that, is like, it's either a distraction from something else, but I don't see what else it's a distraction from, or it's a distraction from the fact that the stupid people are in control. Look at that. I mean, it's going towards $5,000, silver towards $100, round numbers, dead easy. I mean, does it not ring any alarm bells to anybody how kind of obvious all of that is as SPX is challenging at 7,000. It's kind of like they left Mike Besant in the room on his own and he decided, oh, I think that this would look good. And he put down those numbers. You know, the guy that's... Anyway, so that could be just a little sign to us that things could reach a point where everybody else is able to have the conversation. Because you see $5,000 gold, $100 crypto, silver, and equities dumping or something like that, and then you're going to wake up to headline which is almost those exact words across both Fox and CNN, and everybody talking about what that exact setup means, because they'd look at it afterwards and be like, oh my god. So you can see that this is kind of the way that it is, the distractions from the fact that the stupid people are in control and that the smart people are able to run fast within the corridor where they can't commit to decision either way. They would be able to find it easier to commit to decision if they were stupid, but they don't have the conviction that a stupid person contains within them, so they can't quite bring themselves to do that, so they run right to the edge, and then they give up whenever the going actually gets tough. And that's where we are right now. Could silver turn around and so on? But the main thing here is that this looks like it could be into a blow off top, whether you want to look at silver or gold as your kind of metals analog. Of course, recently with oil, we've been speaking about that on the show, and this is showing, let's just say that the in shorthand of it all is that Iran is still going to produce its oil. It still had whatever amount of oil was being sold by Venezuela or whatever to China and so on, was offsetting an amount of demand for that usage. So they go into like someone else doesn't increase supply overall because the other person still needs it, so they'll just buy it from someone else, so then there's less supply, so it actually stays the same. So it isn't really a massive supply side thing. And on demand side, are we seeing that much fear recently from things like prices going back up in the wake of Iran putting back its authoritarian boot on the necks of the people, killing multiple thousands of protesters? Does that sound like oil markets are upset about that? No, oil markets normally like that. So no, this is more to do with probably economic demand, right? Which is a weird thing to say, and as like the kind of the campaign for $50 oil is fully on the way. Just so you know, by the way, your petrol in America is produced because your gas price isn't directly correlated to your oil price. Hardly really is in America. And you're still going to get your cheap gas, even if the oil price goes to $65. Okay, so that's your story. But still, we're looking at this economic activity indicator. Interesting to see that that's doing well. And then we have, in fact, in that sort of, if you're wondering, like, I made a couple of watch lists recently so that you could, in fact, be able to do that type of analysis yourself. And if you watch my shows about them, you'd understand what it was you were looking at, and you'd be able to think, oh wait, I can tell how the economy is actually doing. This is interesting because this means I should have this risk approach to equities. And if you did that, it wouldn't just be the stupid people in control, it'd be you in control too, which is why I try to be transcendent across these realms. Okay, I help all of the smart people, which is us, right, who overthink things and overanalyze, by putting on my big boy jacket and getting into the mosh pit of stupidity and understanding what the people who are in control are actually doing with their like 3 moving parts that they can possibly at maximum think of. Come back over to the world of intelligent, enlightened people like yourself and say, look, this is what's actually happened, and then we can defeat them in our war of money, right? That's the plan. So that's what I'm trying to help with, and I'm looking at that and thinking, hey, there's opportunity there on the crypto market. If actually the middle belly of the economy is doing well, demand showing in oil and so on, if those kind of realities are found, and then especially if they're supported with a move by the Fed, it's unlikely, but it could be at least narratively supported. They might talk about that as being the reason why they move on to actually wanting to make cuts again rapidly, because of what they see in this section, as opposed to Magnificent Seven, so on, could reinforce the narrative. And if that's the case, it would undermine the narrative for silver and gold, especially when those are so hyped by the fact that America seems to be going to war with white people, which America typically doesn't do, and it's only ever gone to war with white people when it's been requested to do so by Europe. It's like, America, come and help us. We have other white people attacking us, and we need you to come in and fight for us. But America typically goes to war with people of color and loses. Has America ever won a war like that? No, it's not. It's only ever had xenophobic sort of wars and lost them. That's it. Iraq. Does that count? I don't know if having to handhold a country for longer than, Einstein said, if you've not come up with your amazing discoveries by the time you're 24, you're never going it. And then you see America kind of handholding Iraq for like the most of that time, and you think, maybe it's never going to. Or else you think, well, maybe they never won the war in the first place. Likewise, Afghanistan, that didn't quite go so well. So actually, no. The Greenland... Yeah, the war lasted a few hours. The other part was just water distribution. So what we're looking at is a situation where, I don't know, I mean, when people start talking about the realities of war in America, they'll have conversations that are kind of funny, like that I just did. If you're finding like a sensitive or insulting way, or a kind of, offensive way of looking at it, it's like you're not ready for Saturday Night Live. Thank goodness it's Wednesday. You'll be fine by Saturday. Because the realities of it is that America ain't going to war with Greenland, and if it did, the goddamn Inuits might win. Like, that's the problem. And they actually are called Inuits on Greenland, by the way. That was the correct term to use. So be careful what you wish for, or something like that. No, the conversation next week is going to be that conversation that we were just having there is preposterous, and therefore let's look at the realities. And because the reality is that at the end of that week there is a Fed meeting and so on, they'll be thinking, hey, look, we've got a week until the Fed meeting, let's start having that conversation. And I think that's what the reality will move on to a bit soon. And we can but the tension with the geopolitical thing should hopefully resolve down to something more manageable, and then we can get back to the actual wars. I mean, like Donald Trump said today numerous times, the war in Ukraine is the worst one ever. He said that there's 30 times the number of people in the room that he was giving the speech to die every month in Ukraine. I thought, that's like the mechanical pieces in his head that he was saying, because I know what it's like to speak live. Obviously, I'm doing it right now. What he was probably meaning to say was, of course, that more than the amount of people in that room die every single day. By the time the month is over, 30 times the amount of people who are sat here today will have died in the war. Obviously, that's what he meant to say, but instead he was like, you add 450 grams of flour and crack 2 eggs. Oh damn! I meant to say cake. Anyway, that's the story for today. That's what we're looking at on the markets. I'm kind of vaguely hopeful because I've got a bit of a, I don't know if you ever want to look up a comedian in that's quite famous with the work he's done in America too, but you wouldn't know it. But a Scottish guy called Armando Iannucci. I'm kind of giving you an Armando Iannucci kind of presentation towards my feelings on things that are happening. But I think that kind of satire is the only way to break down the barriers a bit quicker, right? It's like pouring Coca-Cola over your chicken before you air fry. It's a brilliant idea. That's the contribution from Trainspot. I was going to say it was like pouring Coca-Cola over your mountain of meaning or something. I don't know what it was, because I wanted to talk about how the whole seriousness of the last week needs to have some counterbalance to it. I think that's what we got coming up for us this week, unless you want to double down. I don't know, but China has 3 times as many windmills as the United States of America. It has the biggest solar farm in the world. One of the reasons why China doesn't have that many windmills is because it has a desert that has gotten more power from than it would require to power the residential needs of California. I mean, it's not doing too badly on the power stakes from the renewables. It just, anyhow, it has lots of windmills there too. Quite a lot. I mean, I don't know if it has as many windmills as it does have Muslims living in the country. It's another thing you wouldn't necessarily know about in China, that has loads of Muslims living in the country. But then again, neither do Chinese people know about that, because the government likes to put those Muslims into death camps, But anyway, there's things you can and you can't talk about, and sometimes the way to get the message across is to use a little bit of humor, because when you take away the humor and you're left with just the message, you think, oh right, I received that, but I didn't necessarily collapse inside hearing it at the time. Just like what I said about China's kind of relationship with people of particular religions and so on. So there you go. That's my opinion on things. I'm looking forward to the next week. I think crypto's going to be quite good if it does start to surprise people, which is a weird way of putting it, I suppose. I think that it's probably got a bit of sideways in it, but the volatility is helping me to kind of look at this right now and say, well, at least people are making decisions. If it does crash down the way, by the way, I have to react quickly, I suppose. But looking at it there and thinking that the hysterics might just calm down a wee bit. And I'm looking at the other markets there, making trades as well, considering things like shorts on gold and silver if the opportunity arises, which makes sense to me at the time. But well, I suppose maybe the one thing I wouldn't long, even though I so totally would be oil. It's funny that he says that all of the oil companies are like crawling over themselves to get back, when actually last week he had to kind of threaten to punish them if they didn't go back, because ExxonMobil was like, yeah, we don't want it. Weird. But also, what even is sovereignty? What is reality? What's facts? Who knows? I mean, either you could say that it had dropped by 90% if you wanted to do it by the fake news way, or you could do it the other way where you said it had dropped by 2, 3, 4,000%. Because I mean, there's 2 ways of working it out. One of them is the fake news way, and the other one's where you just say whatever you want. That's the reality. That's the world we live in this week. So I'm looking forward to next week when maths becomes a thing again. It's like the 3-body problem, where they're like, physics no longer exists, and that went down by 7,000%.
Well, there's multiple ways of figuring it, isn't there?
Apparently.
Some would say it go down by 90%, other people say it went down by 7,000%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really enjoyed that show. I particularly liked your ironic take on the markets. I mean, like there's different ways of looking at it. And it would be too blunt and on the nose to say, look, everybody's fed up, everyone's beyond it now. Like a lesson is rarely learnt when you spoke it in anger like that. It's like you just let it all play out, and like everyone's past it, right? Like, if America wants to give up its exorbitant privilege, then we'll stop giving it to them and take away that grace.
We live this life all the time. The people, Canada was talking about it. The thing about basically, we're all supposed to be kind of like allied equals, and then whenever then somebody tries to kind of put themselves above and suppress the other ones, then they think, what's the point? There's not really this freedom isn't free anymore, and for anyone, and that is a funny relationship that we have. We've discussed
to be subordinate.
Who would choose to be subordinate? Yeah, and we discussed that. Scotland was two country like Scotland and England came together in the United Kingdom, and it was two equals, and it became an equal partnership. But when it feels like it isn't, then it does something weird to the other.
Yeah, then the democratic deficit kicks in. Yeah. It creates that friction, which is so bad for everybody.
Yeah, and realizing that things are actually. Because the funny thing is, things are actually okay. If you look at what...
Things are okay, but who can be fucking bothered? What's going to happen is our culture, our society, our collection of nations, the rest of the free world, are going to see this is not actually... our emotional wick has waned. It's already got... Now, that was years ago. But now it's just a risk management proposition. We need redundancy in the system. We need settlement portfolio, not settlement monopoly in USD. We need to have a better relationship with the Chinese and have a Euro renminbi settlement, because that's the natural complementary markets to work together with, us and the Chinese, because China's an aging population. It needs to fix that with increased productivity. You can do that with European robotics, and that robotics in China can then deliver scale that we need it to upgrade our energy infrastructure, which will put us on par with them and then create harmony between our cultures and then a positive new world order.
Well, no, yeah. So we don't need a new world order.
No, we need a redundancy in the system.
We can have a second redundancy in the system, because the framework already exists. And it's funny because you see like Carney talking at Davos, and he listed a bunch of things that they've done, and it's kind of interesting because some of those things had already been done, would have already have happened anyway, and should have happened but hadn't because of just inactivity on their part. But none of them really had anything to do truly with America, and that's him trying to present his opinion back about America. So weird that he can't just present it as being, first off, actually factually honest, and secondly, have done the work, the hard work before to have something to talk about.
This is and then problem. Talk about themselves.
That's if you look at it from the problem point of view. But the reason that problem exists is because it's a discussion about the friction about the systems which already exist, which are functioning systems. It's funny.
Yeah, the systems
we don't need
work
to
and
break the system down.
We don't need to break the system down. What we need is a simple articulation, which reclaims the language and takes it back from overly simplistic political ideologies who've destroyed the concept of entrepreneurism, who've destroyed the concept of republicanism, who've destroyed the concept of conservatism, who've destroyed the concept of democrats, and now on a route to destroying the free world. We need to have just somebody who can articulate these concepts in a way that even the stupidest person can understand and get behind.
It's funny because we now live in a world as well in America where if you feel like you're a conservative, or if you feel like you've got conservative values but you are a Democrat, or if you feel like you're a liberal person but you really truly do believe in the Republican ideology with regards to statehood and so on, then you have economic policy, or if you disregard politics entirely, but you have some specific niche idea, for instance, some to do with body autonomy or something. Yeah. Then you have to define yourself almost now as an independent, and when you see that the system which is supposed to serve those people, I mean they're the only people, that's basically everyone.
That is the people.
When the system is supposed to serve them, no longer represents them in either way, that to the fact that they all get shoved into what would really be a homogeneous group of disenfranchised independents who have different opinions, then it creates a homogeneous group amongst that differences, and it shoves them together. So the world becomes
nation that is chronically insecure about their identity.
No, you don't. But the reality will be that it comes back around anyway, because people say something's got to give or whatever is kind of the easy shorthand for it. But like the reality is that these systems of opinion are reflections of humans and how we interact and talk to each other, and that so long as we exist and we are doing it right, then those systems are. People have forgotten that the creation of places like the United States and the systems that they have there are as a result of having done all this hard work already. And when people fall out and then they get back to them and say, okay, let's just build something new.
Wouldn't it be good if we could?
What they would do is,
here we can't.
Yeah, but what they would maybe do is build what they already have. Yeah, so exactly that's what they did then. So like now they would have to. So they wanted to build something new now. What they would look to do is to try and build what they already have. And when that realization happens, because they're all reflections of how we communicate to each other, and if we're doing it right, then this is what emerges. And if that is the next, like, you know, if the evolution goes that way, like it goes from stone to arrow to bullet to cannon to rocket ship to living on the moon, and if ultimately that's how you live on the moon is by first throwing a stone, then ultimately when we're at the phase where we're all throwing stones at each other, at least we can look forward to living on the moon.
So we're just at the bottom of the wheel, and it'll turn.
That's
all right.
Yes,
that's just the place you want to be.
Yeah, it's the best place to be. You've not been on camera. Nobody said hello. Maybe got to say hello. Look, there's Jamie there. We're chatting to each other.
This is Jamie.
Yes.
Well, I think you're the perfect archetype for this moment, right? Somebody who has tells the hard truths. And in a moment where now everybody knows that the reality is painful and ignoring it more painful still. So now you have somebody who is neutral, who has a geoeconomic lens, and who is explaining the economy in a fair and kind way and deliberately avoiding a huge massive stepping stone in front of him, which would be mockery and ridicule, and instead doing it in a positive, humorous way for our brothers and sisters in America who need to get their fucking act together.
Aye, totally. Hope nobody at all could possibly feel mocked. There's nothing about it. There's nothing in this episode at all for anybody that would even hint at shame or mockery, because we, the human beings, are the ones that carve out the path together, and we do it by talking to each other, understanding each other. Jokes and kind of getting together is just the diamonds and the rocks in the barrel that are turning each other shiny, and this is all part of a process that's done with love and care. What we want here is for everybody to be successful investors. My opinion of the market is that we're caught in this middle, and I explained the middle by looking at kind of out the window at what either side of that looks like. And if we start running towards those, go through the actual checkpoints and make it towards one, we should recognize the territory that we're in when we're there, so we can act accordingly. And that's what this pre-planning has been about. Hope that the messages of hope and everything else have been inspiring for people. You've enjoyed it, that it's brought you to the point where you've considered hitting like on this video and sharing it with a friend. The markets heavily discount hope. Yeah, they absolutely do. Well, that's what this week has been, right? So let's hopefully then there's some delta accrual building up on that one. Yeah, much love to everybody. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so I can see you all again next time. I'm Rocky Outcrop, and I'll be back this